My name is Cora, and I'm 32 years old. Growing up in a traditional Boston family, I learned early that dreams have gender in my father's eyes. Women belong in the kitchen, he'd say while teaching my brother James the family construction business. Despite my business degree and innovative ideas, Dad put me at the reception desk while my brother became VP. The day I watched James take credit for my work was the day I decided enough was enough. Never underestimate a woman with something to prove. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been told you can't do something because of who you are. I grew up in a traditional Italian-American household in South Boston, where the smell of my mother's Sunday gravy simmering all day was as reliable as my father's lectures about family roles. My father, Anthony Ricci, built Ricci Construction from nothing. After immigrating to America with just $20 in his pocket, he was proud, hardworking, and unbendingly traditional. His company grew to become one of the most respected mid-sized construction firms in Massachusetts, specializing in commercial renovations. My mother, Maria, was the quintessential supportive wife, cooking elaborate meals, keeping our home spotless, and never questioning my father's authority publicly. But in private moments between folding laundry and preparing dinner, she would whisper encouragement about my dreams. "You can be anything, Cora," she'd say when Dad wasn't listening. "Don't let anyone tell you different." Then there was my brother James, 3 years older and groomed for the business since he could hold a hammer. Dad would wake him early on Saturdays to visit job sites, teaching him everything from reading blueprints to negotiating with subcontractors. James soaked up the attention, but lacked my father's work ethic. Still, he was male, and in my father's eyes, that was qualification enough. Our family dynamics revolved around strict gender roles. Sunday dinners at our grandparents' house were a perfect example. Women in the kitchen preparing food and cleaning up, men in the living room discussing business and politics. When I tried to join the important conversations, my father would smile condescendingly and say, "Cora, go help your mother. This is men's talk." Despite these constraints, I showed early signs of business acumen. At 12, I started making beaded bracelets and selling them at school, carefully tracking costs and profits in a small notebook. By 14, I was organizing neighborhood fundraisers with impressive efficiency. The summer I turned 16, I developed a scheduling system for my father's cleaning crew that reduced their turnover time by 20%. But he dismissed it as cute. "That's nice, honey," he'd said, patting my head like I was still a child. "But let's leave the real business decisions to me and James." My salvation came in the form of my maternal grandfather, Salvatore. Unlike my father, he had owned a small grocery store where my grandmother worked as his equal partner. He recognized something in me that my father couldn't or wouldn't see. "You have the mind of a true entrepreneur," he told me one day after I shared my ideas for expanding my small jewelry business. "Don't let anyone dim that spark." Grandfather's belief in me planted a seed of determination. If my father couldn't see my worth, I would prove it through education and achievement. I started researching business schools in junior year, knowing I would face resistance, but resolved to chart my own path. While James struggled through high school with barely passing grades, I maintained a perfect GPA and loaded my schedule with business and economics electives. I joined the entrepreneurship club and led our team to state finals in a business plan competition. My teachers recognized my potential, but at home, these accomplishments were acknowledged with only passing interest. "School is good for you," my father would say. "It'll help you find a good husband who can provide for you." The gulf between my ambitions and my family's expectations widened with every achievement. But rather than discouraging me, it fueled a quiet determination. One day, I promised myself I would show my father that a woman, his daughter, could be every bit the business leader he wanted his son to be. I kept that promise close to my heart during family gatherings, when aunts would ask about boyfriends instead of career plans during dinners, where James would boast about minimal accomplishments to enthusiastic praise, while my academic honors went unmentioned, and during countless moments when my father looked through me rather than at me. By senior year, I had transformed from a girl seeking approval into a young woman with unshakable purpose. I would excel not to prove my father wrong, but to prove myself right. And the first step on that journey would be college, a battleground I was prepared to fight for. Getting my father to support my business education was like negotiating with the most stubborn client imaginable. We fought for weeks with my mother nervously mediating between us. "Business school is a waste of money for a girl," he insisted over dinner one night, jabbing his fork in my direction. "What good is a fancy degree when you'll just get married and have kids?" I held my ground. Times are changing, Dad. Women run companies now. I could help grow Ricci Construction. He laughed, actually laughed, and turned to James. You hear that? Your sister thinks she's going to run a construction company. James smirked. Maybe she can decorate the office. I refused to back down, applying to top business schools in secret and securing interviews on my own. When the acceptance letter from Wharton arrived with a substantial merit scholarship, even my father couldn't argue with the financial sense of accepting it. Fine, he conceded reluctantly. Go play business for 4 years. Maybe you'll meet a nice accountant to marry. I arrived at Wharton determined to absorb everything. While James barely passed classes at Boston Community College, I excelled in finance marketing and entrepreneurship courses. My professors noted my unusual drive, unaware of the family dynamic fueling it. Professor Diana Harding, who had built and sold 3 successful tech companies before turning to academia, became my mentor. Unlike the women in my family, she was unapologetically ambitious and respected for it. The construction industry is ripe for innovation, she told me after reviewing my analysis of my father's business model. Sustainable practices, technology integration. There's huge potential there. Your family is lucky to have your perspective. I didn't have the heart to tell her how unwelcome that perspective would be. Each summer, I asked to intern at Ricci Construction in a meaningful capacity. Each summer, my father relegated me to answering phones and filing paperwork, while James shadowed project managers, despite his complete lack of interest in learning the business. During my junior year summer, I overheard a conversation that crystallized everything. I was delivering coffee to my father's office when his voice drifted through the partially open door. No, James is my successor, he told a colleague. Cora, the college thing is just keeping her busy until she finds a husband. Girls need something to do, keeps them out of trouble. I stood, frozen coffee cups growing cold in my hands as my father reduced my ambitions to a temporary distraction. That night, I cried tears of frustration, then transformed that pain into renewed determination. By senior year, I was fielding job offers from prestigious consulting firms and investment banks. My thesis on modernizing traditional industries won the department's highest honor. At graduation, Professor Harding hugged me and said, "You're going to change things, Cora. I can feel it." Despite the tempting offers, I made a decision that surprised even me. I would return to Ricci Construction. Not because I expected my father to suddenly recognize my worth, but because I believed in the company's potential and my ability to realize it. "I'm coming to work for the family business," I announced at my graduation dinner. My father looked surprised, then pleased in a way that made my stomach twist. "That's nice, honey. We could use help with the office administration." "Actually," I clarified, "I want to work on business development and operations. My degree and internships have prepared me for that." "Let's see how things go," he responded vaguely. James shot me a suspicious look. "Dad already has me handling operations." "There's plenty of room for fresh ideas," I said, maintaining my composure, while ignoring the warning signs flashing before me. I returned to Boston with a comprehensive business plan for Ricci Construction strategies to expand their market share and innovative approaches to project management. I was ready to prove my worth not through words, but results. What I wasn't prepared for was just how firmly the door to opportunity would be slammed in my face. My first day back at Ricci Construction hummed with possibility. I arrived early, business plan tucked under my arm, wearing a carefully selected charcoal suit that projected both professionalism and respect for the company's traditional culture. Dad's secretary, Marge, who had known me since childhood, smiled sympathetically as I waited outside his office. "He's running late, honey, meeting with suppliers." 3 hours later, when he finally appeared, he seemed surprised to see me. "Cora, what are you doing here?" "It's my first day," I reminded him. "We agreed I'd start after graduation." Right. He nodded absently. "Marge will show you to your desk." My desk turned out to be the reception area, the very same spot where I'd worked summers during high school. No office, no privacy, no authority. "There must be some mistake," I said, turning to Marge. Her expression confirmed there wasn't. "Your father thought you'd be most comfortable here since you know the phone system already." I took a deep breath and marched back to his office. "Dad, there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not here to answer phones. I have a business degree from Wharton. I've created a comprehensive growth strategy for the company." He barely looked up from his paperwork. "Everyone starts somewhere, Cora. Learn the business from the ground up." "James didn't start answering phones," I pointed out. "James is different. Because he's a man." My father finally looked at me, his expression hardening. "Because he's my successor. Now, are you going to work or not?" Swallowing my pride, I returned to the reception desk. For 2 weeks, I answered calls, sorted mail, and observed the operations around me, documenting inefficiencies and opportunities in a notebook after hours. I noticed the outdated inventory system that caused delays, the haphazard scheduling that wasted worker time, and the lack of digital presence that cost us younger clients. Meanwhile, James swaggered around with Vice President of Operations, freshly printed on his business cards, despite having no relevant qualifications. I watched him make costly mistakes, ordering wrong materials, misquoting jobs, alienating reliable subcontractors, while Dad covered for him repeatedly. "He's learning," Dad would tell frustrated project managers. "Give him time." The same courtesy was never extended to me. After a month of reception work, I decided to take initiative. I stayed late one night and reorganized the chaotic filing system, implemented a digital scheduling tool using the company's neglected software license, and created a simple database to track inventory. The next morning, Marge was amazed. "This is brilliant, Cora. I can find everything now." Word of my improvements spread through the office. Project managers began stopping by the desk to ask my advice on scheduling conflicts. I carefully documented the time and money saved by my system. After 6 weeks, I had evidence that my changes had increased operational efficiency by 23%. I compiled my findings and requested another meeting with my father. "These numbers are impressive," he admitted reluctantly, reviewing my report. "Who helped you with this?" The implication stung. "No one helped me. This is exactly what I was trained to do at Wharton." "Well, good job," he said, closing the folder. "The office runs smoother now." "Dad, I didn't do this to be a better receptionist. I want to implement similar improvements across the company. The construction industry is changing, and we need to adapt," he sighed. "Cora, I know you mean well, but construction is a man's world. Clients won't take a woman seriously. Our crews won't respect female leadership." Before I could respond, James burst in without knocking. "Dad got that proposal for the Harrington project you wanted." My father's face lit up. "Let's see it, son." I recognized the proposal format. It was nearly identical to the template I had created weeks earlier and shared with the estimating department. James had simply put his name on it. "This looks excellent," my father praised. "Very professional." "Thanks," James replied, shooting me a smug look. "Just bringing some fresh ideas to the table." After he left, I confronted my father. "That was my template. I designed it to clarify cost structures for clients." Dad waved dismissively. "The important thing is that it's being used. Teamwork makes the dream work right." The pattern continued for months. My ideas implemented without credit. My suggestions welcomed only when laundered through James or another male employee. My expertise questioned at every turn. The breaking point came when Richard Harrington himself called, impressed with the proposal's clarity. "I'd like to meet with whoever designed this approach," he said. "It addresses exactly the concerns I had with previous contractors." I transferred the call to my father's office, heart racing. Perhaps this external validation would finally open his eyes. 10 minutes later, my father emerged with James in tow. "Cora, hold all calls. We're meeting Harrington for lunch to discuss the project." "Mr. Harrington specifically asked about the person who designed the proposal format," I said carefully. "That was me." My father's expression hardened. "James will handle this client." "But Dad—" "Cora." He cut me off, voice low but firm. "You're just helping out temporarily. James is the face of this company's future." After they left, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried tears of frustration. That evening, I waited until everyone had gone home, and then entered my father's office. I placed my business improvement plan updated with 3 months of data showing potential growth areas squarely on his desk where he couldn't ignore it. The next morning, he called me in and closed the door. "I looked at your proposals." He began, face unreadable. Hope flickered briefly. "Cora, I know you've got all these fancy ideas from school, but this is the real world. This is a man's business. You'll get married and leave anyway." The words hit like physical blows. "I have no plans to get married," I responded, voice shaking. "I want a career here, in the family business." "That's not how things work in construction," he said flatly. "We've always done fine the traditional way." "Is that why we lost the Sullivan account last month? And the Peterson project came in 40% over budget, because the traditional way is working so well?" His face darkened. "That's enough. You forget yourself. If you want to keep working here, you'll do the job you were given." In that moment, something broke and reformed inside me. "And what exactly is that job, Dad?" "To watch James run this company into the ground, while my education and skills are wasted, to smile and answer phones while he takes credit for my work." "This conversation is over," he snapped. "Some roles are for men and some are for women. That's just how the world works." "Not my world," I replied quietly, turning to leave. "Not anymore." I barely remember driving home that day. Tears blurred the familiar streets as 26 years of trying to earn my father's respect collapsed around me. I called in sick the next day, unable to face the reception desk and all it represented. My mother found me surrounded by empty ice cream containers and job listings. She sat beside me on the bed, her familiar perfume a comfort from childhood. "He told you women don't belong in construction," she guessed softly. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She sighed, smoothing my hair as she had when I was small. "Your father sees the world through a very old lens, Cora. One he inherited from his father." "But it's not fair," I whispered. "I've worked so hard." "I know, sweetheart," she said, then hesitated before adding, "I had dreams too, you know." I looked up surprised. My mother had never spoken of ambitions beyond being a wife and mother. "I wanted to be a chef," she continued, "not just cooking at home, but in a restaurant, creating menus, running a kitchen." A sad smile crossed her face. "When I told my father, he laughed and said women cook at home not professionally. Then I met your father and, well, you gave it up," I finished. "Times were different," she said, "but they're changing, Cora. Maybe not fast enough for your father to see it, but they are." She squeezed my hand. "Don't give up like I did." Her words awakened something in me. I would make one final attempt to prove my worth, not for my father's approval now, but for my own satisfaction. I spent the weekend creating a comprehensive business plan that would restructure Ricci Construction's operations, integrate digital tools to streamline project management, and implement sustainable building practices that would attract younger, forward-thinking clients. The plan projected a 30% increase in profits within 18 months. Monday morning, I arrived early and requested a formal meeting with my father and the management team. To my surprise, he agreed. "You have 15 minutes, he said curtly. I made every second count, delivering a presentation that showcased both my expertise and my passion for the company's future. Two of the project managers nodded appreciatively. Even my father seemed thoughtful as I concluded. "Any questions?" I asked, heart pounding with hope. Dad cleared his throat. "We'll take this under advisement. Thank you, Cora." It wasn't the enthusiastic reception I'd hoped for, but it was something, a foundation to build upon, to build. For the first time in months, I felt cautiously optimistic. That Sunday, our extended family gathered for dinner at my parents' house. I helped my mother in the kitchen, watching through the doorway, as my father held court in the living room, James at his right hand as always. When dinner was served, my father clinked his glass for attention. "I have an announcement," he declared. "As you all know, I've been thinking about the future of Ricci Construction." My pulse quickened. Was this it? Had my presentation made an impact? "It's time to officially name the next generation of leadership," he continued. "I'm proud to announce that James will be taking over as Chief Operating Officer effective immediately." The room erupted in congratulations while I stood frozen, serving spoon suspended over the pasta. James, who had shown up hungover to 3 client meetings last month. James, who couldn't read a balance sheet without help. James, who had barely graduated from community college. "Toast to the future of Ricci Construction," someone called out. James raised his glass, already on his 4th beer. "Thanks, everyone. Dad's taught me everything I know, and I'm ready to take the company to new heights." "Cora, bring the garlic bread," my mother called, trying to distract me. I moved mechanically, placing the bread basket on the table as James continued. "Of course we'll keep things traditional. That's what made Ricci Construction great." He snickered, emboldened by alcohol and success. "None of that business school crap about sustainability and digital transformations." My cheeks burned as several relatives glanced uncomfortably in my direction. He was mocking my presentation, which meant my father had told him about it. "We know what works," James continued. "Keep the men building and the women in the office looking pretty, right, sis?" Something inside me shattered. Not into useless fragments, but into sharp, purposeful edges. I served the bread silently, then excused myself to the bathroom, where I made a call that would change everything. "Grandpa," I whispered, "I need your help." My grandfather had offered several times to help me start my own business. I'd always declined, hoping to earn my place in the family company. Now I realized that place would never exist. "It's time," I told him. "I'm ready." The next morning, I typed my resignation letter with shaking hands. Attached was a market analysis highlighting Ricci Construction's vulnerabilities in a changing industry. Not out of spite, but as a final gift, a warning my father would likely ignore. I placed it on his desk before anyone arrived, then cleaned out my meager belongings from the reception area. As I walked out the door of Ricci Construction for the last time, I felt not defeat, but liberation. My father's angry phone call came just after lunch. "What is this nonsense?" he demanded. "You can't just quit without notice. I've given you years of notice, Dad. Years of trying to be heard. So you're running away because you didn't get your way. This is why women can't handle business. Too emotional." "I'm not running away," I said calmly. "I'm moving forward. Somewhere my ideas will be valued." "You'll fail without family support," he predicted grimly. "Then where will you be?" "Free," I answered and disconnected the call. That evening, I transformed my small apartment's second bedroom into an office. With my savings and a loan from my grandfather, I had 6 months to prove everyone wrong, including the doubtful voice in my own head. Starting a business from scratch in a male-dominated industry required more than just technical knowledge. It demanded unwavering belief in myself when no one else would provide it. I called my new venture Nova Construction Consultants, symbolizing both a new beginning and a nod to my astronomical childhood nickname from my grandfather, his Little Supernova. My first challenge was defining my niche. Competing directly with established construction companies like my father's would be suicide. Instead, I focused on what I saw as the industry's blind spot: sustainable building practices and technology integration. Construction companies are ignoring the future, I explained to my first potential client over coffee in my makeshift office. Sustainable materials and smart building technology aren't just environmental choices. They reduce long-term costs and increase property values. He seemed interested but hesitant. "Your approach makes sense, but what's your experience in actual construction management?" The question I dreaded. "I grew up in the industry and have a business degree from Wharton. More importantly, I've developed systems that have demonstrably improved construction efficiency." "Ricci Construction," he asked, recognizing my last name. "Why not just work there?" I took a deep breath. "Sometimes family businesses and new ideas don't mix well." He nodded knowingly. "Tell you what, I have a small renovation project, nothing major. Show me what you can do with that." That small project, converting an old warehouse into office space, became my proving ground. I sourced sustainable materials that matched traditional options in price, but offered superior performance. I implemented digital tracking that allowed real-time updates on progress and expenses. I handpicked subcontractors who were overlooked by larger companies despite their exceptional skills, including several women in trades who faced the same barriers I had. Nights became a blur of spreadsheets, research, and worry. Would the materials arrive on time? Were my cost estimates accurate? Had I underbid in my eagerness to secure the contract? Each problem solved became a lesson learned, each minor victory a foundation for the next challenge. My grandmother had once told me, "Success is built like a stone wall, one solid piece at a time." In those early months, I laid each stone with trembling hands but unwavering determination. The small project finished on time and under budget. My client was impressed enough to recommend me to a colleague, and slowly word began to spread about the innovative small firm with the female founder. Not every meeting ended positively. I grew accustomed to walking into rooms where men assumed I was the assistant rather than the owner. I developed a thick skin against comments like, "Isn't construction a bit rough for a pretty girl like you?" and "Who helps you with the technical aspects?" My standard response became, "I'd be happy to demonstrate my technical expertise once we're discussing the actual project rather than my gender." During that first year, I heard frequent updates about Ricci Construction's continued success under James's leadership. My mother would mention casually during our weekly lunch dates how busy they were, how James had landed another major contract. "Your father's so proud," she'd say, watching me carefully. "The company's never been better." I smiled and changed the subject, refusing to let doubt creep in. What she didn't know, what I discovered through industry connections, was that those new contracts came with razor-thin margins because James was underbidding to win business without understanding the actual costs. 6 months into my venture, my grandfather was diagnosed with aggressive cancer. Despite his failing health, he remained my greatest champion. "You remind me of myself at your age," he told me from his hospital bed. "But smarter, much smarter." "I'm scared, Grandpa," I admitted one evening as his condition worsened. "What if I can't make this work?" His weathered hand squeezed mine with surprising strength. "Fear is just your brain telling you something matters. Use it. Don't let it use you. He passed away 3 weeks later. At the funeral, I stood across the grave from my father and brother, the gulf between us wider than ever. My father nodded stiffly in acknowledgement, but didn't speak to me directly. James avoided my eyes altogether. Grief became yet another stone in my wall, one laid with tears, but no less solid for it. I channeled my loss into renewed determination, knowing my grandfather had believed in me when no one else would. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A major property developer had grown frustrated with delays and cost overruns on a project managed by an old-school construction company. A mutual contact suggested they meet with me. "I'm not interested in excuses about material shortages or labor issues," the developer stated bluntly in our first meeting. "I need solutions." "I don't offer excuses," I replied. "Only results." I presented my approach integrating sustainable materials that were more readily available than traditional ones currently facing supply chain issues, implementing digital tracking for real-time problem identification, and utilizing a diverse team of specialists I'd cultivated relationships with. "This sounds promising," he said cautiously. "But it's a multi-million-dollar project. Can your small firm handle it?" "Size isn't always an advantage," I countered. "Larger firms get bogged down in bureaucracy. We're nimble, adaptive, and hungry to prove ourselves. Give us a chance to demonstrate our approach on one building in the complex. If we deliver, the rest is ours." He agreed to this test. It was the opportunity I'd been working toward, and the risk that kept me awake at night. I leveraged everything, taking out additional loans and putting my apartment up as collateral to secure the necessary bonds. We delivered the first building 3 weeks ahead of schedule and 12% under budget. The developer was astonished. "How did you manage this when everyone else is running behind?" "By questioning every 'that's how we've always done it' in the industry," I answered. We secured the contract for the entire complex the next day. The project garnered attention in trade publications, with one article highlighting "the innovative woman disrupting Boston's construction industry." My phone began ringing with new opportunities. I hired additional staff, moved into proper offices, and expanded our services. 18 months after walking out of Ricci Construction, Nova had grown from a one-woman operation to a team of 15 specialists. We weren't the biggest firm in Boston, but we were developing a reputation as the most innovative. Through industry whispers, I began hearing troubling news about my family's company. James's mismanagement was catching up to them. Projects were chronically delayed. Subcontractors were refusing to work with them due to late payments. Clients were jumping ship. I took no pleasure in their struggles. These were people I had grown up around, whose families depended on the company's success. But I recognized the inevitability of what was happening. Ricci Construction was failing because it refused to adapt. The construction industry was changing, whether my father accepted it or not, and I was positioned to thrive in that new reality. The New England Construction Association's annual conference was the industry's premier networking event in the region. 3 years after starting Nova, I attended not as an unknown upstart, but as a featured speaker on sustainable construction practices. After my presentation, a familiar voice cut through the congratulatory crowd. "Quite the performance." I turned to find my father standing there, James sulking behind him. For a moment, I was that little girl again, desperate for approval. I steadied myself. "Thank you for coming," I said professionally. "I hope you found it informative." My father's expression remained impassive. "Lots of fancy ideas. But construction is about concrete and steel, not PowerPoints and buzzwords." "My clients seem to appreciate both the ideas and the results," I replied, maintaining my composure. James stepped forward, his suit slightly rumpled, eyes betraying his resentment. "Lucky breaks don't make a construction expert, Cora." A potential client waiting to speak with me overheard. "Lucky Nova just saved us $3 million on our last project with their material sourcing strategy. That's not luck. That's innovation." My father pulled James away before he could respond, but the encounter left me shaken. Later that evening, I learned from an industry colleague that Ricci Construction had lost its bid on a major hospital renovation, a project they had counted on to stay afloat through the year. "Word is they're struggling," my colleague confided over drinks. "Your brother's made some questionable decisions." I maintained a neutral expression. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be. They've been underbidding jobs to maintain cash flow, then cutting corners to preserve margins. It's catching up to them. 3 of their project managers quit last month." I recognized the names, experienced professionals who had been with the company since I was a child. Their departure signaled serious problems. The following week, I discovered just how serious when a supplier called to ask if I knew anything about Ricci Construction's payment issues. They're 90 days past due on 3 invoices, he explained. Your brother keeps promising payment is coming, but nothing arrives. Similar calls followed. Apparently, James had been stretching vendor terms to breaking point, damaging relationships my father had spent decades building. Then came the most surprising call of all, from Richard Harrington, whose project had been the catalyst for my final confrontation with my father years earlier. Cora, I've been following your success, he began. Very impressive. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I'll get straight to the point. I'm looking to acquire distressed assets in the construction sector. Your family's company is on my radar. My breath caught. Ritchie Construction. They're in trouble. Cash flow problems, reputation damage, leadership issues. I understand the awkwardness given your history, but would you consider a partnership to acquire and restructure it? The proposal stunned me. You want me to buy out my family's company? You understand both the business and what went wrong. Plus, there's poetic justice, isn't there? I asked for time to consider, then spent a sleepless night weighing the ethical implications. Would acquiring Ricci Construction be justice or revenge? Would it heal old wounds or create deeper ones? What would happen to the employees who had known me since childhood? The next morning, I convened my executive team, the brilliant, diverse group of professionals who had helped build Nova from nothing. I presented the situation without revealing my emotional connection. This acquisition makes strategic sense, my operations director noted. Their equipment assets and client list would be valuable even if their management is a mess. My financial officer was more cautious. We'd need to conduct thorough due diligence. If they're hiding financial problems, we could inherit liabilities. After hours of discussion, we reached consensus. The acquisition aligned with our growth strategy, but only if we could negotiate favorable terms. I called Harrington back. We're interested in exploring this opportunity, but I'd prefer to approach my father directly rather than through a third party. Understood, he replied. Let me know how I can support you. I spent days preparing for what would undoubtedly be the most difficult meeting of my professional life. I reviewed Ricci Construction's public financials, gathered industry intelligence, and consulted with legal advisors about acquisition structures. Finally, I called my father's office to request a meeting. What's this regarding? His new secretary asked. A business proposition. I replied, heart pounding. Tell him it's important. To my surprise, he agreed to meet the following morning. I arrived at Ricci Construction headquarters, a building that had once felt like a second home, dressed in my most confidence-inspiring suit, carrying a leather portfolio containing my offer. The reception area had changed little, but the atmosphere felt different, quieter, less energetic, fewer phones ringing, fewer people moving purposefully through the halls. I noted peeling paint and outdated fixtures that my father would never have tolerated in better times. His secretary, not Marge I noticed, led me to his office. My father looked older, the lines in his face deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped under the weight of struggling to keep his life's work afloat. Cora, he acknowledged, not rising from his desk. What's this about? Thank you for meeting with me, I began professionally. I'm here to discuss a business opportunity that could benefit both our companies. Get to the point, he said gruffly. I opened my portfolio and slid a document across his desk. I'm prepared to make an offer for a controlling interest in Ricci Construction. His expression shifted from dismissive to shocked. You want to buy my company? I want to invest in its future, I corrected. Nova has the capital and expertise to turn around Ricci Construction's current challenges. His face darkened. What challenges? Who's been talking to you? Dad, it's no secret in the industry that Ricci is struggling. Delayed projects, unpaid vendors, high turnover. Before he could respond, the door burst open, and James stormed in, face flushed with anger. You've got some nerve, he spat. Coming here to gloat. I'm here with a legitimate business proposal, I replied calmly. One that could save this company and the livelihoods of everyone who works here. We don't need saving, James insisted, especially not by you. My father raised a hand to silence him, studying my face with newfound intensity. How did you know? Industry networks, former colleagues, suppliers who haven't been paid. James pounded his fist on the desk. This is all temporary. The Henderson contract will turn everything around. The Henderson project that's already 6 weeks behind schedule? I asked quietly. My father's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. For the first time, he looked his age. James, give us a minute. But Dad? Now. After James left, slamming the door behind him, my father sighed deeply. So this is it. Your revenge, swooping in to take what I built when we're having a rough patch. This isn't revenge, I said honestly. It's business, and it's not a rough patch. It's structural failure. The construction industry is changing, and Ricci Construction hasn't adapted. Because of your brother, he admitted quietly. The acknowledgement stunned me. What, James, he's not you. My father looked away. He doesn't have your head for numbers, your attention to detail, your vision. You never gave me a chance to show you what I could do. I was wrong, he said, the words clearly difficult for him. But I'm still not selling my company to my daughter. Then you'll lose it entirely, I replied, not unkindly. The banks are already reviewing your loans. Suppliers are considering credit holds. Without immediate intervention, Ricci Construction won't survive another 6 months. He stared at the offer in front of him. And your proposal? Fair market value for 60% ownership. I'd retain the Ricci name and as many employees as possible. You could stay on in an advisory capacity if you wish. And James, the question I'd been dreading. That would depend on his willingness to accept new leadership and direction. My father fell silent, studying the document before him. Not just a business offer, but an acknowledgement of a changing world he'd resisted for too long. I need time to consider this, he finally said. Of course, I replied, standing to leave, but not too much time. This offer expires in 10 days. As I walked toward the door, he called after me. Cora, I turned. The company. It was supposed to be your brother's legacy, he said, voice heavy with resignation. Mine too. It still can be, I answered, just not in the way you imagined. The negotiations to acquire Ricci Construction stretched over 4 tense weeks. My father, once he accepted the inevitability of change, proved to be a shrewd negotiator, even in defeat. We eventually agreed on terms. Nova would acquire a controlling interest, while the Ricci name would continue, and certain key employees would be guaranteed positions in the reorganized company. Throughout this process, my mother became an unexpected ally. She invited me to dinner one evening while the lawyers finalized contracts. He's too proud to say it, she told me as she prepared her famous lasagna, but he's impressed with what you've built. Really? The validation I'd sought for so long felt strangely hollow now. She nodded. I always believed in you, Cora. I just didn't have the courage to stand up to your father the way you did. You encouraged me in your own way, I assured her. I wouldn't be here without that. On the day we signed the final papers, my father looked both defeated and relieved. The burden of a failing business was lifting, though not in the way he had ever imagined. You'll take care of the people, he asked as we shook hands after the signing. Of course, I promised. They're the company's most valuable asset. The transition period was challenging. I retained most of Ricci's employees, many of whom had known me since childhood. Some embraced the new direction enthusiastically. Others resisted changes to processes they'd followed for decades. James initially refused to stay under my leadership, cleaning out his office the day after the acquisition closed. For 3 months, he avoided family gatherings and ignored my calls. Then, unexpectedly, he appeared at my office one afternoon. I need a job, he admitted, pride clearly wounded. Why come to me? I asked. You could work anywhere. He laughed bitterly. Not with my track record. Word gets around. Rather than gloating, I saw an opportunity for healing. You know this industry, James. You grew up in it just like I did. What you lack isn't ability, it's training and discipline. So, you're offering me a job? He seemed suspicious. I'm offering you a path, I clarified. Starting in project coordination, learning the business properly from fundamentals up, the opportunity Dad never gave me but insisted on giving you before you were ready. His face flushed with anger, then embarrassment, then reluctant recognition. And you'd be my boss. Yes, and your sister, and someone who believes you can do better than you've shown. It wasn't an instant transformation. James struggled with taking direction, especially from his younger sister. There were heated arguments and threatened resignations. But gradually, when he realized I would hold him accountable while setting him up for success, something shifted. He began to excel in roles that played to his strengths, client relationships and team motivation, while acknowledging his weaknesses in financial management and strategic planning. My father observed this evolution from a distance at first. Semi-retired but unable to stay away completely, he would visit job sites and offer unsolicited advice. Initially, he directed his comments only to male project managers, avoiding acknowledgement of my authority. 6 months after the acquisition, I invited him to attend his first board meeting as an advisor. He sat silently through my presentation of the newly merged company's performance projects back on schedule, vendor relationships, repaired, profit margins stabilizing. Questions? I asked, concluding my report. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, the Henderson project. You changed the material specification. Yes, the original choice was causing delays and driving up costs. The client accepted this. They preferred it, I explained. The sustainable alternative we proposed reduces their operating costs by 18% over 5 years. He nodded slowly. Smart. Just one word, but coming from Anthony Ricci, it was the equivalent of a standing ovation. After the meeting, he lingered while others filed out. For the first time in my professional life, we were alone as equals. I was wrong about you, he said quietly. I know, I replied simply. Not just about your capabilities, he continued, but about everything. Women in construction, the changing industry, the future. He gestured vaguely around the office that had once been his. You saw it all coming. I was too stubborn to listen. It wasn't about being right, Dad, I told him. It was about being heard. Over the following year, our companies truly merged, not just on paper, but in culture. I launched a scholarship program for women pursuing careers in construction and technical fields, naming it after my grandfather, who had believed in me when no one else would. The family wounds began to heal slowly and imperfectly. Sunday dinners resumed now with business discussions that included everyone at the table. My mother, inspired by our family's evolution, enrolled in culinary classes at 62, a dream deferred but not abandoned. James and I developed a genuine professional respect that gradually repaired our personal relationship. He became an effective executive once he found his proper role and received the mentoring he should have had from the beginning. As for my father, his journey was perhaps the most profound. One evening, I found him in what had been his office, studying a framed photo of my grandfather that I'd placed on the wall. Your grandfather told me once that I was making a mistake not bringing you into the business properly, he admitted. Said you had the best business mind he'd seen since his own father. He was my biggest champion, I said, missing him still. I should have been, my father replied, regret evident in his voice. I was raised to believe certain things about men's and women's roles, never questioned it until it was almost too late. He turned to face me fully. I'm proud of you, Cora. Not despite you being a woman in construction, but because you're the best dam builder I know. Better than I ever was. 2 years after the acquisition, I led a board meeting in what had once been my father's office, now thoroughly modernized with sustainable materials and smart technology. Around the table sat our diverse leadership team, including 3 women in senior roles. On the wall hung 2 photographs of my grandfather in front of his small grocery store in 1952, and the original Ricci construction team from 1978. My young father at the center, dreams of building something lasting clear in his eyes. Both men had built something that endured, though perhaps not in the ways they had imagined. And so had I. The greatest lesson I've learned through this journey isn't about construction or business strategy, or even breaking gender barriers. It's that real success isn't built on proving others wrong, but on proving yourself right. It's not about seeking revenge when doors close, but about building new doors that open for everyone. Today, I'm more interested in building bridges than walls, in business, in family, and in society. The hardest materials to work with aren't concrete or steel, but pride and tradition. The most important foundation isn't laid in the ground, but in our beliefs about what's possible. Sometimes the truest measure of success isn't what you achieve, but who you become along the way. I became not just a businesswoman, but a builder of new possibilities. What about you? Have you ever had to fight against others' limited expectations to pursue your dreams? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and determination. And remember, the biggest barrier to your success is often not external circumstances, but the limits others have convinced you to accept. Thank you for listening, and may you build your own path forward regardless of who tries to stand in your way.